Good afternoon to you and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon and good afternoon to your viewers.
Let's start then with NUMSA's reaction to these Airchef workers not having been paid since March of 2020.
Well, indeed. I mean, the fact that they've not been paid for such a long period of time is a reflection of how the business rescue process has been mismanaged by the Department of Public Enterprises. When SAA was placed under business rescue in December of 2019, and then of course there was all those lockdowns that occurred. Interruption in the aviation sector had also an impact on SAA subsidiaries. And Airchefs is one of SAA's subsidiaries, and this also includes Mango as well as SAA Technical. So from April, our members have actually only been depending on the TERS, the Temporary Employee Relief Scheme. They've been getting that as payment from April up until October, and nothing in the form of TERS or salary since October. So it's been an extremely painful and difficult time for workers and their families at Airchefs who have had to endure an entire festive season and New Year with no idea of whether they will ever get paid, whether they will ever get any relief, no plan really about the future of Airchefs going forward.
And speaking about the business rescue process that you've mentioned has dragged on for longer than normal, I understand that there was some communication that there might be funds allocated to SAA subsidiaries, but actually that was incorrect.
Yes, so the problem we have is that SAA subsidiaries have not been catered for in the business rescue plan. So whilst Treasury has allocated 10.5 billion rand for SAA to be rescued, SAA Technical, Mango, as well as Airchefs have not been considered in that funding allocation. And the Department of Public Enterprises has misled the management of Airchefs. They've told them that once the money for SAA comes through, then the funding for them to pay salaries will come through as well. But that's just not the case. There's nothing in the business rescue plan that talks about money for SAA's subsidiaries. The only option that we can see as a viable option for assisting workers at Airchefs would be for them to be placed on the training layoff scheme, which is a scheme that is run by the CCMA. How the scheme works is that basically companies which are in distress are placed on the training layoff scheme. Workers are then trained for a period of 6 months. The Airchefs won't have to pay those salaries. The salaries, 75% of their salaries will be paid for by the SETA while they train and upskill themselves for possible future employment if the company was to collapse or if there were retrenchments that were to take place. So this for us is a viable option, but it does have its own pitfalls.
What are those pitfalls, Phakamile?
Well, the biggest challenge right now is that in order for you to qualify for the training layoff scheme, you need to be able to produce financials. And as you know, SAA, the last time that they produced financial statements was for the 2016-2017 financial year. Even under business rescue, they failed to deliver on the financial statements. And without these financial statements, you can't apply for the training layoff scheme. The other alternative would be for Airchefs to provide the company or to provide management accounts which have been independently verified. If they were to do that, they would be able to access the training layoff scheme. This is something that as NUMSA, when we met with management, we've urged them to pursue this option urgently. This is the one thing that we feel if they were able to produce these documents, then workers could get immediate relief.
And was management of Airchefs actually keen to pursue this alternative measure that you've given them? And if they do go for that route of the management accounts, which are independently verified, how long do you think that process would take?
My understanding is that it doesn't take too long for it to be processed. I think it would be a couple of weeks, depending on the information that they provide and if it's to the satisfaction and the standards that are required by the CCMA for this money to be given over. And in our engagements with Airchefs, they do seem keen to try and find a speedy resolution to the matter. But this really, for us, the ball is in their court. They are going to have to be the ones to drive this process. The Department of Public Enterprises will have to demonstrate for once that it is actually committed to trying to help workers secure funding for their salaries, because at the end of the day, they're the shareholder. The reason that we find ourselves in this situation is primarily because of a failure of leadership from DPE. It's not just workers at Airchefs who are suffering. It's workers at Denel, it's workers at SA Express, it's workers at SAA, and all the subsidiaries. And that in itself is a reflection of the total failure at the highest level. So we really need DPE to get its act together and to focus on its core mandate, which is to turn around these entities and to make them viable and to assist workers in the process.
Now, speaking of the Department of Public Enterprises, you did actually try to convince Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan that at a consultative forum last year for provision to be made for these subsidiaries, but these proposals were actually not considered. Did the minister give reasons as to why they didn't consider actually allocating funds for SAA subsidiaries?
What the department has done is, through a media statement, to claim that funds have been allocated to SAA through the business rescue plan. But instead of having made that allocation, they are now trying to blackmail workers into giving up monies which are owed to them, which then they can use that money to fund money for subsidiaries. It's a completely backward and illogical plan, but worse than that, it's a plan which depends on workers sacrificing even more, going through even more hardship because of incompetence and glaring failures by the Department of Public Enterprises in actually properly coming up with a business rescue plan which can deal with SAAs and SAA's subsidiaries.
And just speaking about the emotional state of these workers, considering that they were actually dependent on these TERS payments and received their last payment in October, how are they actually surviving? What sort of state are they in currently?
I mean, you can imagine if you haven't received a salary since October, we are now in the middle of February, what kind of stress and anxiety you must be experiencing. It would have meant that throughout the festive season, you were not able to take care of your family. You've made absolutely no plans for your children to go to school and to plan for the new year. Our members are extremely stressed. Many of them are in danger of losing assets. Some of them have already lost assets or houses. They are depending on favors from family members and relatives. And it's really painful because these are men and women who took pride in their work, who took joy in their jobs, who were committed to their work, but they were let down by an uncaring shareholder and really executives and board members who ran a viable entity into the ground because of mismanagement and corruption.
And just lastly then, I mean, you've mentioned that you have been in talks with management of Airchef. Are you hopeful then that they will take the advice that you've given them and actually have these employees put into that scheme that will see them receiving training while earning an income on the side?
We certainly hope so. In fact, the issue of the training layoff scheme is something that NUMSA and even the SA Cabin Crew Association pushed, not just for Airchefs, but for all workers who were going to be affected by SAA. We had put this on the table as early as last year. Unfortunately, decisions and failure at the highest level, where executives didn't follow up or refused to follow up. You had failure on the side of DPE that refused to act. Certainly, when you look at the fact that SAA right now still hasn't produced financial statements, it's really a disgrace. It's a disgrace. They are highly paid professionals who have been tasked with taking care of these entities. They've completely failed. But those who are paying the highest price are workers and their families for this grand scale of incompetence that we're seeing. So we really do hope that the executives of Airchefs will act with speed to do what is necessary to ensure that these management accounts are produced so that workers can receive relief from the training layoff scheme.
Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Phakamile Hlubi-Majola, who is NUMSA's national spokesperson.